Okay. So for those of you that were late, the pallet's right there. So let's come over here and look at your responses. And E. Devin, I'm going to call you Devin because I know you're one of the first ones in here. So I think you got a little bit of time to work on it. Tell me why you think zombies are living. I know you wrote it down, but tell me why you think zombies are a living thing.
One is because they can reproduce by biting other people and spreading their infection.
You're right, right? They can, you're right. One zombie can make more zombies by biting them and spreading it. Correct. So, yes, they can make more of their kind. And so we can also even look at that and say, well, wait a minute, but can one zombie, like if a zombie can't bite another person and there's no one in sight, can they make more?
No.
And then we get to like, no, right? So we get into that gray area. And that's why zombies are a good example because it's like they have some of the characteristics, but the way that they display them are odd. So yeah, they reproduce, they make more, and in zombie apocalypse movies, that's what we see. But um, they're kind of limited to another human being. And so when we talk about viruses this year, you're going to see that with the virus, a virus has some characteristics of life. Like a virus could definitely make more viruses, and that's what we're seeing in this pandemic. But if you have a virus sitting out on a countertop or on a doorknob and no one in sight to infect, that virus can't make more of its kind. So a virus needs a host. And so without a host, a virus can't reproduce. And so unless you check off all these, I guess, the way that they are, it wouldn't be considered living. So zombies can reproduce. They definitely check that box, but they're limited to finding someone else. Let me call on. Thank you, Devin. Let's see. Let me come back over here. And let's call on mm, Jade. Why do you think? Tell me a little bit about what you answered.
It's because zombies are like they can still walk and function, somewhat function.
Right? And they can definitely walk, move. They're responding to stimuli, right? If you guys have seen the zombie movies, I know like World War Z, I think it was like where the main character was in a lab setting and he was trying to be real quiet so they wouldn't hear him or see him. Because yeah, a zombie can respond to movement, a zombie can respond to sound, and that's respond to a stimulus. So they certainly have that. They meet that characteristic. I'm going to come over here. So thank you, Jade, and thank you, Devin. Let's come over here and see who said no, zombies aren't living? And let me have you elaborate a little bit on that. Um, Fernando, tell me why you said a zombie is non-living.
I guess because I don't know, because they had to die.
Right? So technically they're dead. Would you say that their organs are working?
Yeah,
Like their heart's beating and stuff? I don't know, right? I've never seen that. Like I don't know if they've ever
yeah.
addressed that in
I
a
don't know if
zombie
they
movie.
do.
But they're called like the Walking Dead, right? Because they're like they're decomposed. Like they look the way that they do because technically they're dead. They're decomposing. I know I think I saw in The Walking Dead, like if a zombie couldn't find someone to eat or like bite, they would start to starve. So they almost have like they're not gonna live forever. Like they're gonna die at some point, right? Or
Yeah,
like stop functioning. So yeah, that would be a characteristic of not having life. Um, their organs aren't functioning, but technically I guess they would have a lifespan. So thank you. Yeah, that they're already dead. Like they have to die to be a zombie is I think what I understood. Anyone else say no? Thank you. Anyone? Let me see. Josh, tell us why. What do you mean because they're dead? Like what does that mean exactly? Can you elaborate on that?
I said because they're dead because they're they're dead. Like they're decomposing, and I don't think they can they can produce waste.
Right? They're not pooping and peeing anymore,
Yeah.
which is essentially, yeah, they're not exactly technically breathing in oxygen. I mean, in the movies they are because they're using human beings, but that's something to explore. Thank you. Yes, you're right. So when it comes to zombies, if I had to choose and I was like a scientist and we move on to another planet somewhere and we see these life forms that are zombies, we would have to say because they can't do these things independently, then maybe they are not really quite living. Like they exhibit some signs of life, but if we were to classify them in biology, like a virus, they're non-living things. And so when we look at this list later and we're talking about viruses, we're going to see that it's and because a virus isn't living, we can't just technically like I mean, our immune system can destroy it, but we can't kill it with like an antibiotic or anything like that, like we could bacteria. So we'll see that. with bacteria. Bacteria are living things, and we'll see that bacteria like Salmonella and E. coli, they have all these. But a virus, like for example, a herpes virus, the COVID, the virus that causes COVID, or the rabies virus, they're not going to have all of these. All right, thank you all so much for participating. Make sure that you get that complete, or you complete that, so that you can get the credit for being synchronous today with us, okay? And make sure that you answer yes or no, and then organize a level. So the next part that we're going to move on to for our warm-up are the levels of organization. So today we're going to see how life is organized. Now that we're going to finish defining life and we organize the levels, we're going to see that within an organism, we can break down an organism into like little itty bitty parts. And so we're going to put them from like the most basic parts that make a living thing to the most advanced interactions that we can have as living things. So, Caden, looking at high school, and when I say most basic, I'm not trying to say like freshman year is a basic level, because when we compare it to the other grade levels, like 8th grade, 7th grade, 6th grade, it's definitely more complex. But just looking at high school, right, to be a freshman, you don't have any credits yet at the high school level, and then you're going to build up your credits. You're going to gain more credits every year when you pass classes, and then eventually you'll be at the top tier. But in high school, what is the most basic level when it comes to credits? Caden?
CP.
CP classes, you're right. CP would be underneath like a pre-AP level, you're right. And in fact, you only get 5 points for a CP course versus the 10 in a pre-AP. But what year are you in? And you're right. But what year are we in? Like what is freshman? That's right. So the classification, and then we can even break that down further, like Caden pointed out, CP or pre-AP. But right now you guys are at the freshman level because you don't have any credits yet. When you gain all the credits for your freshman year, what are you going to get bumped into, Michael?
Well, miss?
What's the next level after freshman year? Once you get all your freshman credits and you add and you go into the next year, what's the next year after freshman year?
Sophomore.
Excellent. So 10th grade will be a sophomore. Once you get those sophomore credits and you add to your transcript, or you take more science courses, more English courses, what's the next level? Let's see, Chantel, what's after sophomore year?
Junior year.
Perfect. And then once you get all of those credits and you go on to the very last level, where are we going to head over to, Michelle? What's the last level there, the most advanced here in high school?
The most advanced? Is it like
before you graduate? I'm sorry, before you graduate, what grade level are you going to be in, Michelle?
Senior.
That's right. So when you make sure I see some of y'all have put them in your answer and some of you haven't. So make sure that you're putting that in your answer, you're ranking them. And so we're going to see that with life, okay? With life, I'm going to put here on mine this, and then we'll talk about it, because this is what we're going to go in today. With living things, we see that too. We see that living things are organized, and as we study different levels, we're going to get into the different parts of the level, but we start at a very basic level. We're just atoms, and those are non-living, and then atoms can build on themselves to give us things like DNA and water, which is vital to a lot of life forms, many of the life forms on the planet, and give us proteins, and then we keep building on that until eventually we zoom out into the biosphere. So maybe this would be like kindergarten at the atom level, and then eventually you end up senior year. What we're going to see is that some life forms stop at a certain level. There are some students, for example, after they're done with high school, they're good to go. Like they want the diploma, that'll help them get a job, and then they're satisfied. That's where they'll stop. There are some students that want to pursue college, so they'll go on to a different level and they'll go on to college, right? And then they'll go get their master's in some cases and a doctorate. So we're going to see that some living things, for example, like bacteria, will stop here at the cell level, and they're not going to go any further. But we're going to, or like an amoeba. I don't know if you guys have heard of brain-eating amoebas, but there are these little cells that are found in fresh water. They'll go up your nose and they can eat your brain. It's like 90% mortality rate. But some living things will stop here at cells, and some can continue building and become more advanced. So we'll look at levels today. So if you came in a little later, make sure that you complete that. That's how you're going to get your participation grade. For the 100 participation grade, you need to make sure you answer both questions. So there are 2 questions, and then that you're putting your name for the attendance, okay? What I'd like us to do next is let's go to Google Classroom, and we're going to go to classwork. So ideally, if we were in our classroom, we would be keeping an interactive notebook. And if you want to keep a notebook, you can. Like you can be writing all the notes on an actual notebook. I would prefer that because that's what I like. I like to write things down, but because I don't have a document camera, set up. It's very difficult for me to do that. So I'm doing the interactive version, but you can pick either or. But it'll need to have the same information that you would find here. So what I'd like you to do is go to classwork, go to where it says Wednesday and Friday interactive notebook. And you guys were super helpful last time we met on Wednesday, letting me know that I was typing into your slides. So we kind of talked about the copy, make your own copy. But what I went ahead and did, if you open it, is I added a slide. So you'll have 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to finish this one together today because I think we only got up to number 5. We're going to complete it, and then we're going to continue with this one. And when we get to this one, I'll talk about it, and we'll go through it. So then, and see, like I typed down first period and it stayed there. What y'all are going to do is, since you already have your own copy, what I would like you to do is I want you to take this last slide, and I want you to just copy it. Or you can put duplicate if you want, but you can just copy it. And then I want you to add it, and I'm just using this as an example. I just want you to add it to your notebook that you've been keeping, because you guys should have saved, you have your own copy, right? So you already did one, like slides 1, 2, and 3. You did. So I want you to just take that last slide and put it into yours. That's all you're going to do. Okay? So just take that last slide and just copy it and add it to the one that you saved on Wednesday. And until I figure out something a little more efficient, this is how we'll be adding into our notebook. We'll just keep on adding some slides as we go. And if if a lesson is maybe 3 slides, we'll do 3 at a time, so it's not so time consuming. So I'm gonna come back to y'all in case y'all have questions over here. Okay. Any questions on what we're doing right now? We're opening up our Google Classroom. We're opening up the slide presentation to finish up characteristics. If you came in a little later, yes, go ahead.
I just want to let you know that this is actually my first time being in class because I started school yesterday.
Hi, Ryan. Welcome.
And I just want to let you know that I don't actually have a laptop as of the moment because they said there's a shortage due to that. And they said on Wednesday that they'll have a shipment for it. So I just want to let you know if I'm not able to do some assignments. I mean, I already did everyone's work from other classes, including yours. But just letting you know if there's like some like slide presentation I need to do or anything of the sort that requires me downloading files or any of that type.
Yeah, you're limited. Yeah, right now. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for communicating that with me, Ryan. I'll definitely leave you on Skyward. You won't see whatever involves anything that would require a large download. I'll leave it blank for now until you can get that sorted out. So you can just participate on a separate sheet of paper for now. You're welcome.
Yes,
okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
I kind of lost my copy. When I click on it, it still shows the stuff, my notes I wrote down, but I can't like type on it. So do I have to make another copy?
Yeah, you make a copy of that copy. Yeah, it should work. Or if you download it, it should help.
Entire presentation or selected slides?
Entire. If it doesn't let you type.
Okay.
You could try that.
Wait, Miss, which one did you want us to copy again?
The last one.
Okay.
Just this one. We're just adding it. If you're having a hard time with that, because I know with technology, we're going to have issues, also depending on what your device you're using, you can always follow along on a separate sheet of paper. And when you get an opportunity to kind of have more time, or maybe you and I can conference one-on-one, and we can walk through that together, you can add that. So still keep up with us as best you can separately if you need to, and then you can make up that ground when you can. Okay, so I'm going to continue here with the characteristics of life. You guys had an assignment on Google Classroom, so we're just going to go through the last couple ones together because we had to stop a little early. I think we left off on maintaining homeostasis. Somebody brought up hypothermia. So mostly like sweating, redness, like flushing because of the blood coming to the surface to kind of cool off is brought up as an example of homeostasis, but you can also have the reverse, right? So homeostasis is when organisms like to maintain a constant, and temperature is a really good example because we've all fluctuated out of that comfortable homeostatic range as for a fever, or we're out in the sun, or we're working out, we're like being active, so our body temperature increases and we see the sweating, we see the flushing, we have all of those reactions to bring us back to normal, right? So we sweat to cool down. But if we go in the opposite direction and we get too cold, let's say that you guys are out in the mountains and it's like a winter and you happen to get stranded out there, or you have a situation where you fall into a lake that's been frozen over. If your temperature falls, it can actually also cause damage. And so you have probably heard of frostbite. When your temperature starts to plummet, your body is desperately trying to keep you alive, is particularly your internal organs, your heart, your lungs, those vital organs. So it shuts off like the capillaries, all the little veins that we have, the little capillaries that send blood to the fingers and to your legs and to your nose, all those extremities, they get shut down so that all of the warm blood with oxygen and nutrients can get redirected to your core. So what happens is, because your fingertips aren't getting oxygen or nutrients and your nose isn't getting oxygen or nutrients and your toes, they start to die. And so we see that with frostbite after a while when somebody's been exposed to very cold temperatures for a long period of time and that damage is accumulating. They end up with frostbite and that tissue dies. And so if they get rescued, sometimes they'll have those parts of their bodies amputated. And so, yeah, you can have that reaction too. With the extreme with heat, you've probably heard on the news where a parent accidentally forgets that their child's in the car and they go to work and the child's left in the car seat. And that child's body is desperately trying to keep their body at 98.6, right? But the temperature of the car is increasing. Those little children die because no matter how much they sweat, no matter how much flushing and redness, no matter how much that blood is trying to release that heat by coming to the surface, they can't go back. And so when we stay out of homeostasis for too long, when we venture out of that comfort zone, and it's not just temperature, it could be water levels, it could be pH levels, it could be anything that's not within normal range, that causes death. So it's important for living things to always come back to this home base as quickly as possible. Okay, so the next one, living things have to be able to pass on their genetic information because at a very basic level, we're just made up of cells. Cells need instructions on what to do. Cells need instructions on, are we gonna make curly hair or straight hair? Are we going to make plant cells or animal cells? What kind of cell am I gonna be? Am I gonna be a muscle cell or am I gonna be a blood cell? And so all of those instructions are in the DNA. And so in order for you to pass on those instructions to new cells because cells are going to make more cells, right? Cells reproduce, they're living things. You need to pass on that genetic information to the other cells. So there has to be a way to transmit information, and that is the purpose of DNA. And so all living things have DNA that they can pass on to new cells and then to their offspring if they go on and reproduce. So the cool thing about DNA is you have your own copy. No one has your exact copy. And if you go on to reproduce and have a child, your DNA will get mixed up with someone else's DNA and you come up with a completely new combination. And so we can see the family here in Little People Big World. They used to have a show on TLC. And here are the parents. They have achondroplasia. They have a form of dwarfism, but here are their kids. Here are their offspring, their biological children. And so what we notice is 3 out of the 4 are of average height. They don't have achondroplasia. They don't have the type of dwarfism that the parents would have. And that is because, what do you think happened? So if the parents' instructions was to stop bone growth at a certain point, why do their children then have instructions for average height? Does anybody want to chime in?
Miss,
Mm-hmm.
isn't it because sometimes like it could skip a generation and you can get it from like your grandparents, or like you can get DNA from your grandparents instead of like your parents?
That's exactly right. So as who was that? It's because I can't see your name.
Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. So Daniel's right. So if we look at these individuals, we can't see their parents, but their parents are actually of average height. They just so happen to have a gene for achondroplasia. And when they had their kids, they passed it on. So these parents have the instructions for normal height or for average bone growth, which they gave their kids. So they are expressing their grandparents' genes. And you're right, we pass on genes, but sometimes they're dormant, they're recessive, and we may not see them until later generations. One of their offspring did have the gene directly linked to that achondroplasia, like them. And so you can see the achondroplasia in him as well. But what's interesting is these are actually brothers. They're fraternal brothers, or they're fraternal twins. And so the mom was pregnant with them at the same time, but they got vastly different instructions. But yeah, the neat thing about DNA is the DNA that we have came from generations before us because we keep passing those instructions on and they get recombinate, like there are recombinations of them. So that can sometimes help us and benefit us in ways where we get new combinations of genes that are beneficial. Like with this pandemic, there are some people that are asymptomatic. Maybe their combination of genes fights the virus in a way that is very effective, where some of us have combinations of genes that may make us very ill. So the next part here is all living things require energy and produce waste. So if we're thinking about the most basic life form, which is the cell needs energy to stay alive. So the cells need energy to reproduce, cells need energy to make protein, cells need energy to move around sometimes, right? If you're an amoeba or a bacteria, you have to be able to move around to look for nutrients. At our level, we need energy for our heart to beat, to take a breath, to grow and develop, right? To make more bone, more skin. And so we need energy. And there are two ways to get energy. You can get energy directly from consuming, right? You can eat food. If you happen to be an animal or a plant, you have to eat to take in that energy from another life form. So if you eat beef, you're taking the energy from whatever that cow ate. And if you're things like a fungus or a bacteria, you're not eating so much with a mouth, but you're still taking in nutrients from your environment. And plants, they're different in that they also need energy, but they can get it directly from the sun. So all living things need energy. The way in which we get them can differ, but we all need energy. And then whatever we take in, all of that energy that we take in is either going to help build, like muscle, skin, more parts for that organism, for development. That's called anabolism. Like if you've heard of anabolic steroids, people take that to build muscle. That's to build. But we can also, if we have fajitas tonight for dinner and you break that down, you digest it, you're breaking it down to smaller parts that you can use. So it's like taking a big Lego castle and breaking it down and rebuilding it into what you want to do with it. Next, all living things have to adapt to their environment. And so those of you that are in band, you've missed out on the lovely band camp. And band camp, I'm bringing it up specifically because you're out in the sun for hours at a time. For those of you that do outdoor sports or you like to be outdoors, you may see this for yourself as well. But the longer you spend time in the sunlight, or the more time you spend in the sun, you're going to start to see differences in your skin tone, regardless of whatever initial shade you have. And the reason for that is that your skin cells are reacting to the extra constant UV radiation. So if you're there all the time, your skin cells are going to adapt to that extra stimulus, and they're going to start to produce more melanin so that it can protect you from that sun exposure, because excessive sun exposure can actually be bad for us, right? It's a carcinogen. And so by producing more pigment, we're able to protect ourselves. And that's actually pretty cool, because if you think about the different continents on Earth and the different types of skin tones throughout, if you have individual or countries, right, very close to the equator, or people that live close to the equator, they tend to have a lot of melanin, a lot of the skin pigment, because they're exposed to the sun constantly. So it's a protective extra element for them. And people that live further away, or if your ancestors come further away from the equator, then you make less of it. Like we can see here in the upper arm, that part was probably covered by a t-shirt. So those cells didn't get triggered to make that melanin. So living things will adapt to their environment. And one thing that this pandemic has shown us is that adaptation is important. So that adaptation can be at a very physiological level, like these cells, you have no control of that. Or it could be a behavioral level, like we're seeing with this pandemic, we modify our behavior so that we can protect ourselves or stay alive. Or they could be structural, like living things will adapt to their shape, like maybe like a vine growing around a tree to get more sunlight as it goes up that tree. So we do have to adapt as a living thing. Once we die, you won't see any of that adaptation anymore. And then last but not least, living things have a lifespan. And so all living things will eventually die. There's a point where that cell can't continue life. So if we think about human beings, the average life expectancy is 75 years old, and that's going to depend on what country you live in, also because of access to medical care. And we have outliers, right? People that live longer or less than that, but on average, 75. But there are some bacteria that may live for hours. Those of you that have pets, how long do dogs live? Anybody? And it depends on the breed, but give me some years for a dog.
Like
12.
15 years now?
15?
12, 15, maybe 10, right? 10, in some cases, depending on the breed. So
12.
12, yes. Different species have different lifespans. There are some trees that can live for hundreds of years. Tortoises can live for over 100 years, specific species. So it just depends, but at some point, all living things will die either of old age, predation, right? They were taken out by a predator, disease, or injury. Now, it's pretty morbid, right? Why do living things have to die? But there's actually a purpose to this as well. So what would be a benefit of things having an expiration, living things having an expiration date and not living forever? Anybody want to comment?
What's that thing called where it's called like humus or something? Like when something dies, it goes into the ground and creates nutrients.
Very good. So we need to recycle the nutrients so that other life forms can use it. That's right. Decomposition, very important for that. That's true. What else? How else can we benefit by having a lifespan? Why do we want things to live forever? Go ahead. Sorry.
So we don't overpopulate.
That's right, right? Because this planet has limited resources. We have limited amounts of water, limited amounts of food, vegetation. And if living things like if once we were born, we were here forever to stay put, and we're talking about all life forms, and we don't see that cycling of nutrients, and we have just all of these resources being used up all the time, then that's going to also affect the quality of life. So in a way, right, we kind of have to eliminate some life forms eventually to kind of make room for the new life forms. And so there's kind of that renewal process. But yeah, we have those limited resources. So this is also beneficial in that way, having a lifespan.
But Miss,
Mm-hmm.
what's the
Yeah.
point of living if we're all gonna die?
That is one of those what is it? Philosophical questions, right? What's the point? Well, I don't know about, well, I know, for example, for me, when I think about something like that, I'll think, well, while I'm here, I can make the best of it. Not because if you think about it, the fact that that sperm and that egg, and if we're talking about humans specifically, came together is a super rare event. Like it had to be that specific, those specific cells to make that person. Like if you were lucky enough to be the fastest swimming sperm cell and the egg that was ovulated that month and you happen to like be here, you might as well make the best of it. You know what I mean? So could I give you a purpose? No, I mean, we all interact. I'm sure everyone's existence is going to benefit someone, make someone happy. Having those trees around, they're going to make oxygen for us. Even bacteria
I was
can
the
help
fastest
us.
sperm cell.
What was that? You were the fastest what?
Sperm cell.
You were the fastest one. Yeah. And it took other
Yeah.
sperm cells, but you're the one that the lucky one. Yes. And if had it been any other one, it wouldn't have been you, right? So you could just kind of look at it also that way, how special your existence is when it comes to chance. But I don't have like an actual answer for that. That's more of those philosophical questions. Okay. So, but that's a good question definitely to ponder. So let's take a look at levels of organization now. So now that we're going to be looking at life, let's look at how it's organized. And so we're going to go back into your table, and I'm going to try not to go back and forth so often because I know it's confusing since I'm sharing my screen. If you don't have access to the presentation, you might want to do this on a table on a sheet of paper. You can definitely modify your table to suit your notebook, right? Because this is like too much. Obviously, you can change the font. And I'm going to present so that you can see what we have here on the right and what you're going to be working with. Okay. So next, we're going to look at how life is organized, because what we're going to, the first official unit that we're going to start has to do with the interactions between living things and their environment, which is ecology. So I know like some of your other biology classmates, if you transfer from another class, they're already talking about carbon and nitrogen cycle. But why is carbon and nitrogen, why those are not living things, they're elements. Why do we have to talk about them in biology? And so what we're going to look at is the fact that we are made up of specific elements, specific atoms, and we need to understand why it's important that we interact with those elements, but also interact with other life forms as well. And so here you see this, these pictures at the very bottom is what we call the least complex level, right, or the most basic, which if we're looking at grade levels, I guess would be like pre-K. And then we start to build on those levels. They'll start to kind of interact with each other and with other levels. And then eventually we get to the biosphere. So if we're looking at public school, this would be like senior year. And so as we look at them, you can see the name of the level right here on the side. So here, sorry, it's because I'm trying to get rid of that bar. It says atom. And then there's a definition, and then you can see that. On your table, you have the levels also listed for you, but you have 3 columns. You have definition. There's already a definition for you, but I would like you to reword it in a way that's more user-friendly for you. Then you have an example. So today I'll be going through examples with you, and that's where you'll be typing into today. So today you'll be typing into the example. We'll think of some together. And then the last column, if we were in the classroom, we would be doing this with our notebook, and we'd be doing like a staircase, and we would be showing the ascension of those levels. But for our purposes, you can see here that biotic is highlighted in green and abiotic is highlighted in blue. And that is because some of these levels are non-living levels. So for example, I'm going to take atom. Is an atom biotic or abiotic? Ryan, I know it's your first day, but is an atom living or non-living?
I'm gonna be honest with you, I really don't know between an atom, but if I had to take a guess, I'd say it's non-living.
You're right, because an atom can't reproduce. It doesn't require, yes, so it doesn't have any of those. It doesn't have a cell. You're right. It doesn't have those characteristics. So I'm going to highlight it in blue. Now, if you want to pick your own colors, and you want to use different colors, then you can go in there and edit that. But what we're going to do is as we go through the levels, I want you to identify if that's a biotic level, if it's a not, it's a level without life, or if it's a living level, it's biotic. There's some life form in there. We're going to see later on that some of these levels are both. So there are levels that actually can have interactions of both biotic or living things and non-living things. But that's what that highlighted portion is for. That doesn't go there. That was a mistake.
So kind of like zombies, because like they're kind of like half on some situations.
That's right. Yeah. So we would definitely do half on a zombie. So today you'll be working with the examples. Right here, we're not really going to do anything. If we were in like my original goal was to shade that, like to add those colors, right? Depending on the level. And you can do it that way too. Otherwise, you're not going to use them. Okay. So if you're going to highlight them, you're not going to use that column. So that's just for color coding purposes. So you could also do that.
Can we just type the words biotic and abiotic or no?
You could. That's fine too. Okay. So that's also an option. You can do that there. If you're going to do that, then you'll use that last column. So you can use that last column to color code, type it. But in some way, shape, or form, you need to identify if that's a living level or non-living level. All right, so we're going to get started. So you are here, and you're going to stay here. Obviously, I'm going to be going back and forth, but that's what you'll be actively working on. I'm going to stop a little bit early today at 10:05, and I'm going to ask Devin, just because your name's standing out to me because I know I saw you first. Devin, will you be our timekeeper? And at 11:05, because we leave at 11:10, right?
Yes.
Okay, so at 11:05, Devin, you're going to say, Ms. Pignon, it's time, and we'll stop. And that way I can take questions at the end, okay? For those of you that have questions. All right, thank you, Devin. All right, so you guys are here. And I'm going to go through the levels, and I'll be giving you examples. So you guys are going to be typing in examples as I go through this presentation. Okay. In middle school, I don't know if you guys ever heard of SPONGE. SPONGE is an acronym for the most common elements in living things. And so I want you to put, if you haven't, I want you to put these examples down. And you could even type SPONGE in there. Sulfur is one of the atoms that are most common in living things. So an atom is not living. Every single thing on the planet has atom. It makes up matter. So atoms are everywhere, not even so much on planet Earth, but in the universe. But because all living things are made up of atoms, we're going to start with an atom, but we're going to put sulfur as one of the atoms most abundant in living things. If you've ever smelled someone pass gas or you've smelled rotten eggs, all of that smell, that kind of nasty odor, all of that sulfur. It makes up proteins. And if you have curly hair, the sulfur, because it makes proteins, the bonds in your hair with the sulfur are actually extra tight. They're doubly bonded, and so it makes the hair curl. Well, if you break those bonds through a process like chemical relaxers, it straightens the hair temporarily, right? And that's all because of sulfur. Okay, phosphorus. P is for phosphorus. Let me spell it out for you guys. Also, I know it's a little bit of a difficult word. Phosphorus is going to be found in your DNA. It's also in the soil, very important for plants. If you guys have some fertilizer at home, you'll see that there's phosphorus in there. Oxygen, very vital to most life forms. Not all organisms require oxygen, but we certainly do. Nitrogen is very important. It makes up our proteins. Also important for plants in the soil. Carbon is a big one because all organic matter is made up of carbon. Carbon makes up carbohydrates like sugars. It makes up proteins. It makes up DNA. Every single thing that has life needs carbon. And then last but not least, hydrogen. Where would we find hydrogen that we use constantly? Like, what do we take into our bodies that has hydrogen in it? It's liquid. Water, that's right. Yes. So hydrogen is super important. It actually is also a component of our DNA. So those atoms are super vital to life. By themselves, if you just have hydrogen atoms, okay, we don't really we can benefit from that, but we can't really take those in. When these atoms interact with each other and we get molecules, then we start to get kind of like that advancement through the levels and they become a little bit different. So here we have oxygen and hydrogen. By itself, right, they're just atoms. Together, they make water. So where it says examples, I listed some here for you guys. You're going to put those there, not molecule, but just carbohydrates, lipids. So some molecules essential to life would be carbohydrates, things like sugars. You guys have probably heard of carbs before, like low carb diets. Carbs are like maintaining or like
Oh, yeah.
not eating too many carbs. Why is that even, why are you going to regulate that? And we'll get into that this year. But all living things need carbohydrates as an energy source. So plants make them with photosynthesis, and then we benefit from them at a cellular level. Your cells need this. So when we talk about living things, we're talking at a cellular level. A cell would require this. Lipids are fats. Lipids get a bad rap, right? Because they can cause damage, especially like saturated fats that come from animals. They can clog your arteries, but we do need fats. Fats make our hormones, but lipids in this case, which are fats, make up your cell membrane. The membrane around your cell is made up of fat. And so we need to every living life form, from a bacteria to a human being, we need those lipids to make up that cell. Water is vital to a lot of the life forms here on our planet. And our planet is so unique in that it has water, right? Liquid water, and it allows for life. If you go into other planets, you may find ice, or you may have what may have been water at some point. But as far as we can document, our planet is the only planet with liquid water, which allows for life to thrive. Proteins are important because they're going to make up in animals, for example, muscle, hair, nails, skin. And then in plants and all other life forms, they make up enzymes that are going to help that cell to work. And we'll talk about what enzymes are later, but all cells need them. And then last but not least, we need those instructions for the cell, which are DNA. So these are examples of molecules. So if you have atoms, then you can put them together to make molecules. When those molecules start to work together, you get organelles. Organelles are cell parts. So I'm going to come over here to you guys, and we're going to brainstorm, because I know you guys have looked at organelles before, right, in middle school. And call on you will help me come up with some organelles. Okay. Josh, did I call on you today already?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm going to stop presenting just so I can get more names here. Okay, I'm going to call on these 3 students, and just let me know. I'm going to call on you one at a time. I'll share my screen again. So Michael, you're going to answer a question. Emilio, you're going to answer a question for me. And Lauren, you're going to answer a question for me, okay? So give me a sec. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, Michael.
Yes.
Give me an example of a cell part that you remember from middle school. Yes, you're writing it in your notebook right now.
Like tissue and all that?
Not quite. Parts of a cell. Let me give you an example. A ribosome is a part of a cell or an organelle. Can you think of one?
Can I help him out on this one?
Who's this? Who? It's because I can't see your name. Yes, Ryan. One sec.
Like cell membranes and stuff like that.
Yes, right. Cell membrane. What was that, Ryan? Thank you, Michael.
I think it's called chlorophy. Something like that along the lines.
There's something called a it's close. Chloroplast. Have you heard of yes, that's a cell part. Yep. Chlorophyll is a cell, it's a pigment in it, but yeah, you're right. Who is next? Emilio, give me another one. Another cell part. And you guys are putting this in your table. Very good. The mighty mitochondria. Most of you recognize that as the powerhouse of the cell. We'll talk about what exactly it does, or how it makes power, if you will. And then our last student, I'm trying to think. I know who it is. Let me come back. Lauren, can you give me another organelle, please?
I don't know any.
Okay. So make sure you're writing these down. Nucleus would be one. Smooth ER, rough ER, any of those, but those are cell parts. When those cell parts start to interact with each other, then you get a cell. At a most basic level, we could break cells into a prokaryote or a eukaryote. You guys have probably heard of that. Some people pronounce it eukaryote, prokaryote. But we can talk about maybe a plant cell or an animal cell. And because we're made up of animal cells, we're going to work with animal cells today. And we're going to put in different types of animal cells. And so you guys are putting this in your table. All right, we're going to focus on human beings today, and we're going to put nerve cells, which are called neurons. Those are brain cells. We talked about reproduction a little bit. Sperm cells, those are cells. A red blood cell. That's a cell in the human body. We also have a muscle cell. We have fat cells. We have a bunch of different types of cells in the body. They all do different jobs. You wouldn't expect to find, for example, a muscle cell in the brain because your brain's not made up of muscle. Okay, so put those examples there in your notebook. So if we were to go up the hierarchy, once cells start to work together, I'm going to come back here. Remember, I recorded this. I'm recording this. So if I'm going too fast for you, you can always come back too. Once cells start to work together, they can actually start to then form what's called tissue. So tissue is like a team of cells. And so some living things will stop here at the cell. Like there are some of you that might be loners, you like to be on your own. This is where you're going to stop. But there are some of you that may like to be in groups. You might like to collaborate with others and do group work. You're going to continue on to this next level. So when we look at the cell, what are some life forms? And I put it here. So if it's not on yours, put it on there. Some life forms that stop at the cellular level are things like bacteria. They're not going to go on to form tissues. And since they're just singular cells, we cannot see them. They're there. We can't see them because they're too small. Things like amoebas, the brain-eating amoeba, that's just one cell. And so they stop at that level. So not all cells will continue on to these next couple levels. But since we're looking at human beings specifically right now, we're going to continue to go up the level. And now we're at tissue. So tissue is a group of cells. So not like brain cells mixed with fat cells. That's different. We're looking at like muscle cells working with muscle cells, brain cells working with brain cells. And so I'm going to come back over here, and you're writing it on your end, but I'm going to type it here in our chat box. How are we doing on time, Devin?
Good, Miss. Still 11:02.
Awesome. All right, so some tissues. Brain cells make nervous tissue. So you would expect to find that when they work together. Red blood cells will work with white blood cells and platelets to form blood. A lot of students are surprised that blood is considered tissue, but that's because it's made up of a lot of different types of cells. Right? A lot of red blood cells, a lot of white blood cells. It's tissue, even though you can't really it's not a solid, it's still considered a tissue. When muscle cells work together with other muscle cells, they make muscle. It'd be like the muscles in your arm or the muscles in your heart or the muscle in your heart. You can also get fat tissue, which is called adipose. When somebody gets a liposuction, when they actually suction out all of that fat tissue. And then you can also have tissue like epithelial tissue in your skin. That would be more of an organ, so I'm not going to put it quite there. Those are some examples of human tissue. You can also have tissue in plants, right? You can have tissue that makes up the leaf, tissue that makes up the root. And then for organs, this will be the last one, right, Devin? You'll tell me when we're done. Nervous tissue, what organs would you find that in? Or what organ that is helping you think right now?
The brain.
Perfect. Brain and nerves as well, which interact with the brain to communicate. Blood, what system would you find blood in? What's in that? I don't. What system would you find muscle in?
Tissue?
Pretty much every organ.
It's tissue, yeah, a lot of organs. So that tissue would be found in your heart. That's an organ. It would be found in your stomach. You would find it in your body, like on your arm.
Miss, it's 11:02.
Thank you. So what I'd like you to do is make sure you add at least those organs. If you can think of more like kidneys and skin and all those, add them to there. So for the weekend, I'm going to stop there with the lecture part. Thank you, Devin. For the weekend, what I'd like you to do, or over the weekend, you have a copy of the presentation. I also recorded this and I'm going to upload it. What you're going to do is you're going to all the way up to organism. You're going to work on that part. So you're going to give me examples of living things. You're going to give me examples of organ systems that you can think of, at least 3. We did the organs together, and it goes here, I'm sorry. And then you're at least going to highlight or type or whatever, however you want to do it, whether that's a biotic level or an abiotic level. Okay, so just like we did here, you're going to do that for the others too. You're going to stop at organism. So you should have examples filled, and then you should have whether it's biotic or abiotic filled. And then I want you to define it in your own words.
It's okay if I do this on paper, right?
Yes, and then
Pencil.
you can and then you can send me a picture.
Thank you, ma'am.
Miss,
You're welcome.
do we turn this in?
I'm gonna check it on Monday. I'll probably ask you to just send me a screenshot, and I'll open up an assignment for it. So you won't see an assignment yet, but you'll see one on Monday for you to submit it.
Okay.
Alrighty, guys. If you understand what you're doing over the weekend and you're just filling up to organism, and again, I recorded it, so you can always come back and watch the video again if you're unsure. If you don't have any questions, have a wonderful weekend. If you have some questions, you can stick around, and I'll be here for the next couple of minutes. Enjoy your weekend.
I have a
See you.
question.
Yes, right.
Miss.
Bye. Yes. Bye.
Where can I find the PowerPoint so I could just see all the names
The
and as
power
such?
the PowerPoint is in your Google Classroom on under the tab that says asynchronous assignment for Thursday.
Oh, okay. Let me see, just in case.
Right here it says characteristics of life, but if you scroll all the way down, you start to see the levels. It's what I was using today.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't see the chart though that you have.
Oh, the chart that I have? No, that one you're gonna find where it says Wednesday, Friday interactive notebook. If you click on that, you'll find the chart. If you have access on your own time, maybe to a desktop, you might be able to copy that. If not, I can email you a copy of it in Word or something like that.
Oh no, it's okay. It loads on PowerPoint.
Okay.
Let me just see, just in case. Just loading right now.
Okay. While you're looking at that, anybody else have any questions? Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to tell you, I'm sort of like in the same situation as Ryan, but just a little different.
Okay, so you can't
Where,
get a hold of it. Can you do it on paper? Like, can you see
that's the
the
thing.
Go ahead.
Since I was gonna get the paper and because I don't have any paper on me right now.
Okay.
I'm at home. That's the problem. That's the main problem I have.
Could you record yourself and maybe at least show me that you know the like maybe
Yeah, that's why I've been just screenshotting and everything. So, because right now I'm gonna get the paper in a little bit. Like once I'm done with all of this.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna just get the paper and write down everything that I need to write down. That's
Okay,
why I was just
Fernando. Thank you for letting me know. So when would you think would be a reasonable time to get this done? Like next week on Thursday?
Yeah, that's when I should be heading back home because I have to get
Okay.
it the next. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll give you an extension, Fernando. I wrote it down. So you have until next week on Thursday to get all that stuff. So right now on Skyward, I'll just leave it blank, okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
Miss,
Yes, Devin.
I just want to make sure. What are we gonna do again on the weekend? Because I'm gonna forget like 5 minutes later.
Okay, no worries, Devin. What you're going to do on the weekend, we're going to come back to the slide. You're going to work on organ system all the way down to atom. Most of it's already done because we did it together. But what you're going to do is you're going to give me examples of organ systems, examples of organs, examples of tissues. Those should already be filled out because we did them together, right? So you should have been typing them. And then you're going to let me know, or you're going to identify if that level is living or non-living. So an organ, is that a living level or a non-living level?
Living. No.
Living, right? Because it's made up of cells, it needs energy, all of that. So we're going to go ahead and highlight it with the living color.
Okay.
Or you can write abiotic, right? Or biotic. Okay, if you want to do it that way too.
Okay, thank you, Miss.
You're welcome.
Have a great day, Miss. Bye.
You too. Bye.